Rikers Island, a place where time moves differently, where a single mistake can swallow a lifetime, and where some people enter as suspects but leave as stories whispered in every jail across America. Hidden behind the razor wire coils and the roar of jet engines from LaGuardia Airport lies New York City's most feared institution, a place critics call a pressure cooker of violence, a broken machine, and, for decades, the beating heart of the city's criminal chaos. But the truth is far darker than the headlines. Because Rikers Island isn't just a jail. It's an ecosystem, one fueled by corruption, silence, desperation, and a history soaked in real-life tragedies that shape the lives of thousands of inmates and officers alike. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're re-watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Today, we are pulling back every curtain. The inmate uprisings no one reported. The secret tunnels beneath the island. The officers who tried to save the system, and the ones who helped break it. And the forgotten victims whose names echo through every cell block. This isn't a story about one event. This is the story of decades of chaos. A story of New York's biggest jail, and the dark secrets that turned it into one of America's most notorious institutions. Hold your breath. Because once we begin, you'll never look at Rikers the same way again. Rikers didn't start as a nightmare. In fact, when it opened in the 1930s, the plan was simple: a humane jail, isolated from the city, surrounded by water, where inmates could safely be separated from the chaos of Manhattan. But within a few decades, the population exploded. By the 1980s, crack cocaine, gang wars, and rising crime pushed the island to its breaking point. Dorms built for 40 people suddenly held nearly 100. Cells meant for temporary detention became long-term survival chambers. And that pressure created something no one expected: a violent ecosystem where power shifted every day, alliances formed overnight, and entire housing units could change hands with a single fight. Officers were outnumbered. Inmates were desperate. Politicians were in denial. And Rikers began to transform. Not into a correctional facility, but into a battlefield with ever-changing rules. Imagine this. You're arrested in New York City. You're brought to court, processed, and suddenly a judge says the words you never expected: remanded to Rikers Island. From that moment, the clock resets. Your name becomes a number. Your freedom shrinks to the size of a jail uniform folded on a metal bench. New arrivals are placed into the iconic Rikers intake system, a place inmates call the forgotten hallway. Metal benches line the walls. Bright lights never turn off. Hundreds of men wait for hours, sometimes days. No beds, no privacy, no sense of time. The intake officers scan the crowd like detectives, trying to read faces, body language, gang ties, because one wrong placement can spark an all-out war inside a housing unit. For some inmates, this first day becomes the longest day of their life. And for others, this is when they realize they're not fighting the justice system anymore. They're fighting the island itself. Rikers Island is actually a collection of jails, 10 massive facilities stitched together on a 400-acre piece of land floating between Queens and the Bronx. Each building has its own culture, its own rules, its own power structure. Some blocks are quiet, controlled by older men who just want to survive their sentence. Others are war zones, units where gangs like the Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, Trinitarios, and local NYC crews battle for dominance. But the strange thing? Power doesn't always belong to the strongest inmates. Sometimes it belongs to the smartest. Sometimes to the one who controls the phones, or the commissary, or has an officer willing to look the other way. Everyone plays a role in Rikers. Even the people who want nothing to do with the streets are forced into the islander's social hierarchy, because in a place this overcrowded, neutrality is almost impossible. And as the years passed, the balance of power inside these buildings started to shift in ways that shocked even veteran correctional officers. If the inmates are trapped inside the system, the correctional officers are trapped right beside them. Rikers officers face one of the most dangerous jobs in America. They walk into massive dorms with 50, 60, sometimes 80 inmates, often alone. Their radios don't always work. Their backup can be minutes away. And in those minutes, everything can happen. The island has produced stories of officers who became heroes, breaking up riots, protecting vulnerable inmates, and risking their lives daily. But it has also seen officers who crossed the line. Some smuggled contraband, some formed alliances with gangs, some became part of the corruption that fed the chaos. To understand Rikers, You can't just study the inmates. You have to look at the system that forces officers into impossible choices every day. And that pressure is what led to some of the darkest moments in the jail's history. Rikers is filled with stories. Some tragic, some unbelievable, some that shook the entire nation. There's the story of Khalif Browder, a teenager accused of stealing a backpack, who spent years on Rikers without a trial, facing isolation, violence, and a system that failed him at every turn. His case exposed the deep cracks in the islanders' foundation, cracks that couldn't be ignored anymore. But Khalif was not the only one. Thousands of people, innocent, guilty, young, old, have passed through those gates and left with stories that haunt them for life. Some speak of mentorship and hope, older inmates stepping in to protect the weak. Others tell of betrayal, friends turning on each other for survival. Every story becomes a puzzle piece. And when you put them together, you begin to see the full picture of an institution spiraling into crisis. One of the darkest secrets of Rikers Island is the mental toll it takes on the human mind. Crowded dorms, endless noise, unpredictable violence, and the constant fear of what might happen next, it wears people down. Breaks routines, breaks identities. Many inmates enter with mental health struggles. Even more develop them inside. Officers, too, carry the weight of trauma. Sleepless nights, high stress, and the emotional impact of witnessing conflict every single day. This silent crisis created a ripple effect, one that made even small arguments explode into chaos, one that forced the city to question whether the island could ever truly be reformed. If you or someone you know is struggling, remember that help is available. Organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness can provide support and resources. For years, New York City leaders promised to fix Rikers. New buildings, more staff, better programming, a safer environment. But reform on an island built on decades of chaos is like patching holes in a sinking ship. And as time passed, each solution came with new problems. Each promise brought new criticism. And every tragedy sparked new demands to close the facility entirely. Yet, even today, Rikers remains open, still active, still operating in the shadow of its past. Across the water from the bright, sleepless glow of Manhattan lies another island, one that never truly sleeps, but for very different reasons. This is Rikers Island. After 9 p.m., a heavy quiet falls over the dorms, but it's never silent. You can hear whispered deals near the back wall, the soft tap of chess pieces on metal tables, or a tense argument brewing between two men who haven't slept in what feels like forever. And always, the heavy, rhythmic footsteps of correction officers making their rounds, their eyes scanning every face for the first sign of trouble. Most documentaries show you Rikers during the day, under the harsh sunlight. But the real stories, the ones that define this place, unfold in the darkness. Night is when small disagreements explode into serious fights. It's when officers, stretched to their absolute limits, try to control entire dorms from behind plexiglass doors. And it's when inmates are left alone with their thoughts, staring at the ceiling, replaying the choices that brought them here, with no escape. The night reveals the raw truth. Rikers isn't just a jail. It's a psychological maze where survival depends on your ability to read the room, trust your gut, and know when to become invisible. In most prisons, survival might be about raw strength or gang affiliations. But on Rikers, survival is a game of politics. Inmates must navigate a complex, unwritten social code. Who controls the phones? Which crew dominates the shower area? Who has the power to decide when the TV gets turned off? Even something as simple as a bunk bed can be claimed by one group or considered cursed by another. Every single detail of daily life is shaped by these invisible lines of power, drawn between gangs, neighborhoods, and individual personalities. A quiet man from Brooklyn might find himself in conflict with a loud newcomer from Queens. A seasoned inmate might offer you guidance, but that guidance often comes with a demand for loyalty. Correction officers watch this intricate game unfold, often acting like referees who've had their whistles taken away. Getting directly involved can escalate tensions in an instant, making a bad situation even worse. The strangest part? Some units manage to run smoothly, almost peacefully, because the inmates themselves enforce a strict order. They create their own rules and settle their own disputes, not out of kindness, but because chaos is a threat to everyone's survival. Rikers forces everyone inside its walls, both officers and inmates, to become political strategists. A wrong friendship can be dangerous, and a misplaced word can shift the balance of an entire housing unit. When that balance breaks, the consequences ripple across the whole island. Every jail has a hidden economy, a system of trade that operates beneath the surface. But the economy on Rikers is different. It's fluid, unpredictable, and built entirely on scarcity. Here, everyday items become currency. Food, toiletries, even a simple pencil, everything has value, and everything can be traded. A packet of ramen noodles can be used like cash. A bar of soap can become a powerful bargaining chip. A small pouch of instant coffee can either make you friends or create bitter enemies. But the real power isn't just in goods, it's in access. Controlling the phones means controlling the flow of information. Controlling commissary pickups means controlling resources. Some inmates build their influence through commissary funds sent by their families on the outside. Others earn respect by becoming negotiators, mediating disputes and preventing fights in exchange for favors. This underground economy reveals another truth about Rikers. The official rules might be written down, but the real rules are renegotiated every single day by the people living inside. And when that economy collapses, whether from confiscations, shortages, or lockdowns, the tension spreads like wildfire, and the fragile peace shatters. By the mid-2010s, Rikers Island was facing one of its most severe crises, a massive staffing shortage that pushed the correction officers to their breaking point. Hundreds of officers were calling out sick. Many retired early, while others transferred to safer posts just to escape the pressure. This crisis left entire housing units, filled with dozens of inmates, supervised by just one or two officers, a nearly impossible and incredibly dangerous task. Reports from that time described officers working exhausting double shifts, surviving on little more than energy drinks, running on pure stress and adrenaline. The impact on the island was immediate and devastating. Response times to emergencies slowed to a crawl. Conflicts between inmates escalated much faster than before, with fewer officers available to intervene. Overworked and exhausted, officers struggled just to maintain a basic level of control. The island wasn't just overcrowded with inmates, it was dangerously undermanned. And in a place where a few seconds can be the difference between life and death, this shortage turned Rikers into a ticking time bomb. The officers weren't simply villains or heroes. Most were just ordinary people trying to survive the same broken system as everyone else. This shared struggle sometimes created moments of unexpected humanity, but it also created an environment where the immense pressure could break even the strongest individuals. Few people outside the correctional world know this, but beneath Rikers Island lies a hidden network of service tunnels, maintenance hallways, and old infrastructure passages built decades ago. These aren't the stuff of movie escapes or secret hideouts. Instead, they play a silent, crucial role in the island's daily operations. Officers use these tunnels to move between buildings safely during storms or emergencies. Maintenance crews travel through them to fix utilities without having to cross through inmate-occupied areas. And old-timers on the island will swear that some of these tunnels lead to forgotten storage rooms, sealed off and lost to time. These underground passages are a perfect symbol for the island itself, a place with layers and layers of history buried beneath every new policy, every new building, and every new attempt at reform. Rikers isn't just a collection of jailhouses. It's a living relic, a massive structure that has been patched together piece by piece decade after decade, until its very foundation became a metaphor for New York City's long and complicated struggle with crime, poverty, and the true meaning of justice. One of the hardest parts of being on Rikers isn't the constant threat of violence, the endless noise, or the suffocating uncertainty. For many, it's the profound sense of isolation. Inmates often report that after just a few weeks on the island, they begin to lose all track of the outside world. Holidays come and go unnoticed. Birthdays fade into just another day. Even the weather becomes an abstract concept, viewed only through narrow, reinforced windows. Phone calls are limited, and visits from loved ones can be complicated and infrequent. The only consistent reminder that life is still happening outside is the roar of jet engines from the nearby LaGuardia airport. This crushing isolation changes people. Some withdraw completely, retreating into themselves. Others become anxious and aggressive, their fear manifesting as anger. Many cling desperately to routines, endless push-ups, reading whatever they can find, meticulously cleaning their small bunk space, just to keep their minds from unraveling. Officers feel this isolation too. Many describe the island as a world completely cut off from the city it's meant to serve. They cross the Rikers Island Bridge each morning and feel their mindset shift, a mental transformation that becomes automatic over time. The island creates its own reality, and for many who pass through its gates, it's a reality that they never fully escape, even long after they've left. While most people imagine Rikers as a place dominated by men, The island is also home to the Rose M. Singer Center, a facility known as Rosie. This is where women are held while facing charges, awaiting trial, or serving short sentences. The stories from inside Rosie are rarely told, but they are some of the most powerful and emotional on the entire island. The women here face the same overcrowding, the same threats of violence, and the same soul-crushing uncertainty as the men. But they do so with a host of additional challenges. Many are dealing with pregnancy, struggling with childcare issues on the outside, and facing unique medical needs. A large number have histories of trauma, and the separation from their children and families weighs heavily on them. Some women arrive strong and determined, but many others arrive broken and terrified. In this environment, many of them develop deep, sister-like bonds, protecting each other in ways that are rarely seen in the men's units. The caseworkers, nurses, and officers at Rosie face their own unique pressures, constantly trying to balance the need for security with compassion and the necessity of discipline with emotional support. The struggles here reveal a side of Rikers that is often overshadowed by stories of male violence. It's a powerful reminder that the island's broken system affects every type of person, from every walk of life. Perhaps one of the darkest chapters in Rikers' long history involves the treatment of teenagers who were held on the island. For decades, minors, some as young as 16 years old, were housed right alongside adult inmates. This policy exposed them to unimaginable violence, exploitation, and psychological trauma that many would never recover from. Heartbreaking reports from that time revealed a horrifying reality: young inmates being forced to fight older, more violent ones, teenagers being placed in solitary confinement for their own protection, and officers who were completely overwhelmed by the impossible task of managing children in a maximum security adult jail. The public outcry over these conditions eventually sparked major reform. In time, most minors were removed from Rikers and sent to juvenile facilities. But the scars of that era remain, not just on the individuals who were forced to live through it, but on the very reputation of the island itself. The juvenile crisis became a critical turning point, the moment when the world was forced to pay attention to what was really happening behind the barbed wire fences. Rikers Island. For decades, it's been a symbol of everything wrong with the justice system. We've all seen the documentaries, the news reports, the political debates. But what you see on the outside, it almost never matches the reality on the inside. Some reports exaggerate the violence. Others try to sanitize it. Most of them only focus on the chaos, completely ignoring the complex human stories behind the walls. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Rikers is a place filled with danger, yes, but it's also filled with humanity. It's a place of flaws, corruption, and chaos, but also resilience, courage, and moments where people come together against impossible odds. The media only gives you snapshots. Rikers is an entire world, and to truly understand it, you have to keep peeling back the layers. Not every crisis on Rikers Island comes from violence. Sometimes, the most dangerous moments come from silence, from a sudden, unnerving stillness. There's a day that officers and inmates still whisper about, the day the island stood still. A massive, citywide power outage hit the island without warning. Backup generators were supposed to kick in, but they didn't, not immediately. For a few long, terrifying seconds, the lights dimmed, doors clicked, and the entire facility felt like it was suspended between order and total chaos. Officers froze in place. Inmates stopped mid-sentence. And in that eerie, flickering half-light, everyone was thinking the exact same thing. What happens if the power doesn't come back on? This wasn't an escape attempt or a riot. It wasn't some headline-making event. But in those few seconds, the true vulnerability of Rikers became crystal clear. Here was a place built on decades-old infrastructure, dependent on aging equipment, surrounded by water, and it was just one failure away from complete disaster. When the lights finally surged back to full strength, the whole island seemed to exhale as one. But that memory lingered. Because for that brief moment, every single person inside realized just how fragile the system really was. But it's not all darkness on Rikers. Hidden away in corners of the island are places where people are genuinely trying to break the cycle that brought them there. They're called the program rooms. These are small classrooms where inmates study for their JEDs, therapy rooms where counselors teach anger management and coping skills, and creative spaces where people can paint, write, or learn a trade. Now, these programs are almost always understaffed, underfunded, and constantly disrupted by lockdowns. But when they do happen, they spark real transformation. You'll see a quiet man who never speaks suddenly open up in art class, painting memories of his childhood. Or a young inmate who struggled with reading his whole life finally pass his GED test, and that victory feels bigger than the walls keeping him inside. The officers who supervise these programs often say this is where they witness the best of humanity. The vulnerability, the growth, the hope. In a place that was built entirely on punishment, these small rooms offer a rare chance at rebuilding. Deep inside the island, there are units that many inmates fear more than any gang dorm, the mental health units. These wings house people battling schizophrenia, severe depression, PTSD, and deep-seated trauma. Some are stable on their medication, some are unpredictable, and many are just deeply misunderstood. The officers who work here need more patience than muscle. The nurses move through the units like lifelines, and the doctors are juggling caseloads that are impossibly heavy. Inmates here talk to themselves, they pace the hallways, cry softly at night, or just sit in complete silence for hours on end. And in this environment, a whole new set of challenges emerges. Keeping medications consistent, managing sudden emotional crises, preventing self-harm, and simply guiding people who feel trapped not just by walls, but by their own minds. This part of Rikers reveals a difficult truth. Many people inside aren't monsters or hardened criminals. They are people in pain. People who needed help long before they ever needed handcuffs. If you or someone you know is struggling, please know that help is available. You can call or text 988 in the US and Canada to connect with a trained crisis counselor for free, 24/7. In the UK, you can call 111. Reaching out is a sign of strength. If there's one daily ritual that captures the sheer madness of Rikers, it's court transport. Every single morning, before sunrise, dozens of inmates are woken up abruptly. They're lined up, half asleep, to be shackled for the long bus ride to courtrooms all across the city. The process is slow, cold, and completely unpredictable. Some guys wait hours before even boarding the bus. Others spend the entire day locked in holding cells underneath the courthouses, concrete rooms with no clocks, no windows, and no idea when or if their name will ever be called. The correction officers managing these transports are under enormous pressure, trying to coordinate schedules, handle mountains of paperwork, and maintain security. It's a logistical nightmare that often leads to frustration on both sides. But you know what the most heartbreaking part is? Sometimes, after a full day of waiting, an inmate is told their case has been postponed. And then it's the long trip all the way back to Rikers, only for the exact same cycle to repeat itself the very next day. Contraband is the invisible enemy of every jail. But on Rikers Island, it's an all-out war. Not a war with traditional weapons, but a war of creativity. Inmates would craft makeshift tools out of toothbrushes, hide forbidden items inside hollowed-out mattresses, and orchestrate these elaborate schemes through coded phone calls and hand signals. Most of it wasn't even dangerous stuff. We are talking snacks, extra clothing, maybe a small radio. But the real threat came from the items that could shift the balance of power inside. Smuggled cell phones, drugs, and blades made from metal torn from a broken bed frame or light fixture. Officers searched cells daily. Some searchers would turn up nothing. Others would uncover entire inventories hidden in places you would never, ever expect. This contraband war wasn't just about greed. It was about survival, control, and influence. Because on Rikers, possessing something that others don't gives you power. And power is the most valuable currency on the island. Here is a part of the justice system that most people on the outside never really understand. The vast majority of people on Rikers are not serving sentences. They are waiting. Waiting for a court date. Waiting for their lawyer to call. Waiting for evidence to be processed. Waiting for a single decision that could change the entire course of their life. Some wait for weeks. Some wait for months. Some wait for years, without ever being convicted of a crime. This waiting becomes its own form of psychological torture. It completely changes the rhythm of life inside. It creates this constant, grinding anxiety, deep-seated anger, and a profound sense of hopelessness. Officers will tell you that the most unpredictable inmates aren't always the ones with long sentences. Sometimes, they're the ones who have been waiting the longest with no answers at all. Rikers is a place where time served doesn't always mean guilt. More often than not, it just means waiting. And that uncertainty becomes a fundamental part of the punishment, long before a verdict is ever reached. But despite all the chaos, the pressure, and the very real danger, there are officers who have dedicated years, even decades, of their lives to trying to make Rikers a better place. Some launched mentorship programs for younger inmates. Some quietly protected vulnerable people when no one else would. Some even blew the whistle on corruption, risking their own careers. and some pushed for reforms that genuinely changed the island for the better. Their stories almost never make the headlines. Their victories aren't dramatic or cinematic, but their impact is real. These are the officers who de-escalate fights before they even start. The ones who will sit with an anxious inmate at 2 a.m. and just talk them down. They are the ones who remind everyone, both inmates and fellow officers, that humanity still matters, even in a place like this. These officers show a side of Rikers the world rarely acknowledges: compassion in a system built on punishment. And without them, the island would have completely collapsed a long, long time ago. Every correctional facility has a rulebook, but Rikers Island has too. The first one is official: policies, procedures, codes of conduct. It exists on paper. It exists in training rooms. It exists in meetings where officials promise change. But the second rulebook? That's the real one. The one learned through whispers, habits, and survival. Inmates know that certain officers can calm a room with a glance, while others spark tension simply by entering a unit. Officers know which inmates are natural leaders, which ones need space, and which ones can diffuse or escalate a fight in seconds. Neither side openly acknowledges the second rulebook, but everyone follows it. It dictates who sits where during meals, who sleeps near the back wall, who makes announcements about phone time, and who decides when it's safe to walk the corridor. This invisible code is the glue that keeps Rikers from falling apart, and the fault line that threatens to crack at any moment. Tucked behind steel doors and antiseptic hallways is a part of Rikers many try to avoid: the infirmary. This is where injuries, illnesses, and stress all converge. Doctors race from room to room. Nurses juggle endless caseloads. Officers stand guard while patients battle physical pain, fear, or withdrawal. Some inmates come here after fights. Some after panic attacks. Some after days of exhaustion that finally break their body. But the infirmary also holds something more: truth. This is where people unravel. Where tough inmates admit their anxiety. Where officers quietly confess that they can't sleep after certain incidents. Where the mask of survival slips, because pain doesn't care about status or reputation. In this place, rivalries pause. The roles blur. Humanity resurfaces. And for a moment, Rikers feels less like a battleground, and more like a hospital filled with broken people trying to hold themselves together. Every jail has legends, men who have been inside long enough to learn every secret, every trick, every hidden danger. On Rikers, they're known as the old-timers. These are inmates who've cycled through the system for years, in and out, charge after charge, unit after unit. They know which dorms run smoothly, which officers treat inmates fairly, and which hallways you never walk alone. If a newcomer is smart, he finds an old-timer to guide him. Not for protection, but for wisdom. Because the old-timers are storytellers. They've seen riots, policy changes, whole buildings close and new ones open. Some are respected. Some are feared. Some carry trauma they never talk about. But all of them understand one truth: Rikers Island isn't just a place you survive. It's a place that marks you, even long after you leave its gates. Holidays on Rikers are strange. They don't feel like holidays. They feel like echoes of something familiar and distant. Meals might be slightly better: a small piece of cake, a different entree, maybe a gesture from the kitchen staff. But the emotional weight is heavy. Inmates think about families gathered around tables, kids opening gifts, mothers praying their sons will come home. Officers feel it too. Many work overtime, missing their own celebrations, trying to maintain order in a place where emotions simmer dangerously close to the surface. For a few hours, the island grows quieter. People talk softer. Tension eases. It feels like peace might be possible, until the night comes. Because after the lull, reality hits harder than before. Arguments erupt. Memories trigger anger. And the fragile calm shatters like glass. Holidays remind everyone what they've lost, and what they're still fighting to keep. Storms hit Rikers differently than the rest of New York City. The island sits exposed on the East River. Winds stronger, waters higher, tension thicker. When a storm approaches, officers scramble to secure outdoor areas, medical staff prepare emergency kits, and inmates brace for the unknown. Flooding can cut off pathways. Power flickers. Alarms buzz unpredictably. But the real danger isn't the rain. It's the fear of losing control. A rumor spreads faster than wind. Will the bridges close? What if they lose power again? What happens if the water rises? Inside crowded dorms, thunder feels magnified. Raindrops on metal roofs sound like warning bells. But storms also create unity in unexpected ways. Inmates help each other move bunks from leaking areas. Officers reassure men who fear the dark. The island becomes a single organism, everyone hoping the system holds just long enough to ride out the weather. Rikers Island has official archives, files, reports, hearings, statistics. But the real history? It lives in memories. In the stories told quietly in hallways, in the shared glances between people who've seen too much, in the moments no camera ever captured. There are stories of inmates who protected strangers, officers who saved lives, nurses who comforted men after devastating news, teachers who saw brilliance in people society had written off. There are also stories of tragedies, mistakes, conflicts that spiraled out of control. These stories aren't written down. They aren't analyzed by news outlets. They aren't shared in courtroom statements. But they're real. They shape the island more than any policy ever could. And if you talk to enough people, officers, inmates, staff, you will hear the same sentence repeated again and again. People will never know what really happens here. In the end, Rikers Island isn't just a jail. It's a warning. A place built on fear, fed by neglect, and sustained by a system that forgot one uncomfortable truth. When you break people without rebuilding them, when you treat violence with more violence, when you turn a jail into a pressure cooker, the damage doesn't stay on the island. It leaks into the neighborhoods, into the courts, into the families waiting on the outside, into the very soul of a city that calls itself the capital of the world. For decades, Rikers has been the place where the city sends its problems, but somehow, the problems always come back stronger. The stories of the forgotten, the broken, the ones who never had a chance, they echo through every hallway, every locked cell, every name written in chalk on a wall where someone didn't make it to trial. Reform isn't just paperwork. It's not a headline. It's not a promise during an election year. Reform is humanity, and humanity is the one thing Rikers ran out of a long time ago. But here's the truth people don't want to say out loud. A jail is dangerous because of what is inside the walls. A jail is dangerous because of what created those walls in the first place. Rikers Island is closing. At least, that's what they say. But until the city decides to change the system that built it, Rikers will simply move to a new address. In the end, Rikers Island doesn't disappear. It lives on, in every life it touched, and every story still buried beneath its concrete. Thank you for watching this investigation into one of America's most notorious jails. If you want more deep, true crime documentaries like this, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, the truth rarely lives on the surface.